Welcome to Bethlahem Matriculation Higher Secondary School. I am Binila, your English teacher, grade 11. The lesson, The Portrait of a Lady by Kushwant Singh. Today let us look at the line-by-line explanation of the chapter, The Portrait of a Lady for Class 11, Part 2. Take a textbook, page number 2. The line starts with, as the years rolled by, we saw less of each other. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. I would tell her the English words and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity, arithmetic principle, the world being round, etc. This made her unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and the scriptures. One day, I announced that we were being given music lessons. She said nothing, but her silence made disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. The explanation is, here the author says, as the years passed away, they met each other less. That means their friendship was reduced, and his grandmother used to wake him up and made him get ready for school. When he used to return back from school, the grandmother would ask him what the teacher had taught. So this was the relationship between the grandmother and the writer. So he would tell her the English words, Western science, the law of gravity, arithmetic principles, etc. But she was not happy with that because there was no teaching about God or scriptures. One day, the author told her that the music lessons were taught in the school. She showed her disapproval by keeping silence. After that, she rarely talked to him. The next line is, when I went up to university, I was given a room of my own. The common link of friendship was snapped. My grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignation. She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel spinning and reciting prayers. Only in the afternoon, she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. While she sat in the veranda breaking the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirruping. Some came and perched on her legs, others on her shoulders, some even sat on her head. She smiled but never shooed them away. It used to be the happiest half an hour of the day for her. The explanation is, when he started going to university, he was given a room of his own. So the friendship between them was snapped. Here, snapped means cut off or broken. So she accepted her seclusion with resignation means she accepted her loneliness with a lot of understanding, and she started spinning the wheel and reciting her prayers. So in afternoon, she used to relax by feeding sparrows. When she was breaking the bread at veranda, hundreds of little birds around her with bedlam of chirruping. That means they would create noisy or confusion sound by making repeated sound like high-pitched sounds or short sounds. This to continuously it will be making. So the birds on her legs and shoulders, it came and sat, or even on her head it used to come and sit. But how she will feel is she smiled for that. She is very happy for that, but never shooed them away. It was the happiest half an hour of the day for her. The next paragraph is, when I decided to go abroad for further studies, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age one could never tell. But my grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave me at the railway station, but did not talk or show any emotion. Her lips moved in prayer. Her mind was lost in prayer. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. Silently, she kissed my forehead, and when I left, I cherished the most imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. The explanation is, when the author decided to go abroad, he thought that his grandmother could be upset at his departure. The author thought that for 5 more years she would not survey until the time when he would be back. She came to the railway station to send him off, but did not show any emotion. Her fingers were busy in counting the beads of her rosary while chanting prayers. She kissed his forehead. He felt the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between them. The next paragraph is, but that was not so. After 5 years, I came back home and was met by her at the station. She did not look a day older. She still had no time for words. And while she clasped me in her arms, I could hear her reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer with and with frivolous rebukes. The explanation is, after 5 years he came back home. The grandmother also came to the station to welcome him. It seemed she did not grow older. She was reciting prayers. Even on that day, the author's arrival, the happiest moment for her was feeding the sparrows. And frivolous rebukes means your light-hearted scoldings. The next paragraph is, in the evening a change came over her. She did not pray. She collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum and started to sing. For several hours she thumbed the sagging skins of the dilapidated drum and sang of the homecoming of warriors. We had to persuade her to stop to avoid overstinging. It was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. The explanation is, that evening there was a change in her character. She did not pray. Instead, she collected women of the neighborhood, got an old drum and started to sing the songs related to the homecoming of warriors. They tried to convince her in order to avoid overstraining. The author felt that she did not pray for the first time since he had known her. The next paragraph is, the next morning she was taken ill. It was a mild fever and the doctor told us that it would go, but my grandmother thought differently. She told us that her end was near. She said that since only a few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life, she had omitted to pray. She was not going to waste any more time talking to us. The explanation is, she felt ill the next day morning. It was a mild fever and the doctor told that it would be all right. She said that as it is the last few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life, that is the end. She felt that it was the end. She was not going to waste any more time talking to anybody and omitted to pray too. So the next paragraph is, we protested, but she ignored our protest. She lay peacefully in bed and telling her beads. Even before we could suspect, her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. A peaceful pallor spread on her face and we knew that she was dead. The explanation is, we protested, that is her relatives protested on her decision, but she ignored everyone's protest. She lay peacefully in bed praying and counting the beads. Soon her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. Her face turned into pallor, that is pallor means pale in color. When the people is getting sick, they will be having the pallor. And her relatives knew that she was dead. The last paragraph, we lifted her off the bed and, as is customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. A few hours of mourning, we left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. In the evening, we went to her room with a crude stretcher to take her to be cremated. The sun was setting and had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. We stopped halfway in the courtyard, all over the veranda and in her room, right up to where she lay dead and stiff wrapped in the red shirt. Thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. There was no chirruping. We felt sorry for the birds, and my mother fetched some bread for them. She broke it into little crumbs the way my mother used to do, and threw it to them. The sparrows took no notice of the bread. When we carried my grandmother's corpse off, they flew away quietly. Next morning, the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. The explanation is, the family went to make arrangement for his grandmother's funeral. In the evening, they went to her room with a stretcher to take her to be cremated. Cremated means buried or burnt. The sunset had lit her room with golden light. They stopped halfway in the courtyard. Thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor all over the veranda and her room. There was no sound of chirruping. The sparrows mourned the death of his grandmother in utter silence. Thus, the birds ignored the breadcrumbs thrown at them by his mother. They flew away silently when the body was carried for cremation. The next morning, the sweepers swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. Thus, the writer Kushwant Singh described the scene of her death. His description about his grandmother is deeply moving with his usual poetic touch. Thank you. Students, for grade 11, I would like to suggest Sura Guide for this year. And you can go for the page number 5 in your textbook. 7 question answers is there. Take your guide and go for learning the 7 question answers from your guide. And do the vocabulary exercise in page number 6. Complete this too. I hope you will be doing this exercise. Thank you, students.